Hey guys, welcome back. We're so glad to have a guest podcast for you today, a guest episode. And today we're talking to Katie LaCelle, who is a lifelong seeker and recovering corporate executive who loves helping women thrive personally and professionally while prioritizing self-compassion and presence. She's a great fit for our podcast. She's passionate about mental health and trained in IFS, a trauma-informed therapy modality. She has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and a master's in organizational leadership, and deeply enjoys integrating all of her knowledge to meet and support people where they're at. In her spare time, she coaches and performs on the flying trapeze. So welcome, Katie. We're so glad to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being hosted and definitely been looking forward to this conversation for weeks. So glad to be here.
We have to.
It's so fun. Definitely being at like a cafe with our favorite drinks in Thailand, really, because there's gorgeous cafes here. That would be even better. But this is the second best, and we will have this chat. We'll pretend we're in a beautiful rainforest cafe chatting with you about the things that we love, IFS, all IFS centered. So I would love to know kind of a little bit about your story and how you got into this realm of emotional health and healing and mental health.
Yeah. So I have a friend who is in academia, and one of the things she always says is all research is me search. So, you know, it's a personal and a professional journey. I, for a really long time, always wanted to do kind of one-on-one health and wellness work, but I was in the corporate world for about 13 years and honestly was just really too scared to leave. I had a lot of times where I would try. I went to yoga teacher training in 2010. I got like a personal training certification. I kept kind of having these, I want to do something else, and kept just being like, well, I'm just not quite ready yet. And when as I kind of moved up the ranks, I got the amazing opportunity to work with a leadership coach. And I told him that, you know, I really wanted to semi-retire, and I'd said something like at 40. And what I meant by semi-retire wasn't not work, but just work for the things I'm really passionate about, for the things that I believe are really important. And he kind of looked at me and he said, okay, that's great. What's going to be different when you're 40? Wow. And that question really just stuck in my brain. And it took me another 3 or 4 years to make that change. But that, I always think of that as that catalyzing moment of, oh, right, this isn't just going to happen to me. I am going to have to figure out what's in my way and how important it is to me to make this happen. And one other thing that I think is important is I started working with a therapist about 3 years ago who uses IFS, and I've had therapy quite a bit throughout my life, but this was kind of the first time that it really worked for me in a new way. And I started just going really deep into IFS and kind of reading, the manual for therapists, and just, yeah, I've got a lot of academic and researching parts, right? So they kind of went nuts, and that really dovetailed with, I want to do something else. I want to do something that feels more purposeful, more meaningful to me. And it all came together.
Wow. That's so cool.
So cool.
I just love hearing that internal dialogue and wrestling of like being stuck, kind of like, I mean, as you hear your story, it's like, oh, listen to those parts. Like,
yes,
don't leave corporate world. You can't do this. That's not safe. You're not ready. And then this other part's like, but it's good. It's exciting. It's what you're passionate about. That true self coming out. And as the hearing, and then as you started getting to know those parts and collaborating with those parts, it sounds like some of those parts kind of joined with true self, and it's like, hey, let's do this. And I love that.
Yeah.
But it is a scary journey, a hard journey as you're doing that therapy, as you're going from what's familiar to what's unfamiliar. But here you are.
Yeah. And I had / probably still have a really, really strong self-like achiever part, right? And the corporate world is very comforting and rewarding for achiever parts
Sure.
because it gives you kind of a formula to a certain extent, right,
Yep.
for success.
Yep.
Okay, here's your step now, here's your next step, kind of here's the path you can follow. And I'm heavy air quotes for people who don't end up watching this, but this is what success looks like, right? Like and when you are still learning to be in touch with yourself, you're very, I think, prone to wanting to take what is the truth from out there, right? Like, what does success look like? I don't know how to define that for myself. I have to go with somebody else's definition because I don't have one for myself yet.
Right.
So it's an easy place to get stuck. And then, you add in financial trauma and there's all sorts of other stuff, right, layered in there. But
Always
it makes a
is.
lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called complex trauma for a reason.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Turns out.
Yep.
The name does fit the
Right.
circumstances.
Yep.
And you know what, Katie, it's neat that this part, like, this isn't the theme of our episode, but I love that we just love story, and your story is I think will speak to a lot of our audience, because we see, at least anecdotally, as we're working with folks, that when they're doing this deep inner healing work, they often change professions. Like, I don't know what the I would love it to be studied to see, like, if it's actually the incidence that's higher. But in our practice, personally, we've seen a lot of folks have really big shifts professionally, or even if it's not their profession, just their whole
Passions.
like their focus. You just see, like, them go down this path that's so much more aligned with who they truly are, and then in and of itself ends up being a healing agent in their continued healing journey, which is just so, I love those cycles and that positive feedback loop. So it's really neat that that's been your story.
Yeah, one of the biggest aspects of layering on those protections is taking on someone else's idea of what it means to be safe, what it means to be acceptable in the world. And healing and that vulnerability of, but what do I like and what do I believe is right? And what's my truth of the world? Because there are very few universal truths, right? It's all about how you're looking at it and what's right for you, your biology, everything else about you. So
Story.
Of course it would be correlated, right? The more in touch you're going to get with who you truly are, then what you want. And it's much easier to make a hard choice when you're in touch with what you want.
Right.
It's so
totally true. We call it like a knowing. And some people may be unfamiliar with that, like a knowing of what, but just a deep knowing, like that word has resonated so much with us, of just, it's comes from a place of embodiment, and really being kind of keyed into yourself, and in the IFS model, really having loads of access to self. And so, let's go into, we have an episode, I just looked it up real quick, season 2, episode 21, listeners, called Learning About Your Parts. So go ahead and check that out. If you haven't done anything IFS before, you're going to want kind of some framework to hang things on. So check out that episode.
That's like an IFS 101 kind of thing.
Yep. And it's with Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred. She's lovely, and she explains the principles of IFS and the parts really well. So there's that. And now, Katie, do you mind giving us your the way that you see IFS and how you explain it for clients? Just kind of a quick overview.
Yeah. So IFS teaches us that we all have parts, and those are kind of sub-personalities that have their own thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and beliefs. This is not abnormal. This is normal. It's everyone. It's not pathologizing. And those parts are kind of, as you go through your life, those parts may pick up what we call burdens. And those are, roles that they take on in your system. Like an achiever is a really good example. So an achiever might be keeping you safe by getting you positive attention. That might also be keeping you safe by keeping you busy and distracted. So, maybe there's something that your system really doesn't want you to think about because it's too painful or it's too overwhelming. So there are different reasons why these parts might pick up these roles, depending on kind of what's happened to us. And the way that IFS categorizes parts is we've got protective parts and we've got kind of vulnerable parts that are also called exiles. Protectors can be proactive or reactive, and the proactive protectors, the ones that kind of protect by like pre-planning or like really like anxiety is usually a really good example. Parts that hold anxiety are usually good examples of managing protectors, whereas firefighting protectors are reactive. So, for example, you're at work and you get called into your boss's office and you get some like feedback that feels really, really bad. Your firefighter who, calls your friend and trashes your boss, like that might be a firefighting part, right? Because there might be a part in your system that thinks that what your boss said is like devastatingly true in some way, like I'm not good enough or I'm worthless. And that belief feels so scary and dangerous and overwhelming to your system that protector is going to come up and do anything it can to keep that from kind of flooding you. And then the other thing I'll say real quick, so as a quick overview, is IFS also teaches we have a self, capital S self, which is not a part. And that's kind of like what's there when all of the parts have unblended, when you can kind of see them all clearly for who and what they are. And that's your wise internal system leader. I've also think of it as like being truly present and truly embodied, being right here, right now, because a lot of times your parts might be stuck in the past or stuck in the present, and having access to that self energy, there's that groundedness and that ability to be really present with what's here right now that I need to respond to.
I really like hearing it that way. That's really neat.
That was a really helpful explanation. So thank you for that. Just a real quick question. Would you say that the burden that a protector picks up, is that kind of like their job?
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, their job, their role, different ways to refer to it, burden, job, role. Generally something that is, I hate generalizing, or I should say one of my parts hates generalizing, right? It's like, there's always nuance. Don't make sweeping statements.
Right.
But in general, those protective parts don't like those roles. If they're burdened roles, it's something that they have taken on when you maybe were younger, didn't have the same access to different types of coping skills or safe enough environments or safe enough people. So they're going to potentially be more extreme, more limited, more binary, and those parts may not have access until you do that work to, oh, this could actually be facilitated in a different way. We could still be safe doing that in a different way. And that's part of the work with building that trust with self, is over time helping to gently, get that part to kind of let go of that burden and take on a new role in the system with some aspect of agency and choice.
Yeah. So just going back to like what you mentioned earlier, like maybe the you had maybe an achiever part. So the achiever part, its burden is to make sure that you're successful, that you keep on achieving, and they're, like you said, that that manager that wants you to achieve is protecting maybe that vulnerable part, the exile. And so the burden is make sure you achieve so that you feel safe.
Yeah. And specifically personally for me, my achiever was, yes, it was about being, again, air quotes, successful and kind of some positive attention. But in my system, it was more about an exile who held a lot of like my emotional PTSD flashbacks. And whenever I would stop, my system would be in danger of getting flooded by a lot of that, stuff that's in my body, right? And that's in kind of the way that I'm wired. And so that achiever's job was really like, don't ever stop.
Distraction.
Yeah, for
Okay.
me.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and that's just a good reminder that like the burden may look the same for many people, but maybe the exile, the purpose that it has can be very different depending on the story, the adaptation, how old you were when that protector came in, because a 6-year-old protector is going to be very different than a 20-year-old protector. So that's a good example of, like, again, we can have generalizations of, yes, it wants you to be safe. Okay,
Right.
but how does it want you to feel safe for this person, for me, for you specifically? And that's where it is important to be curious. So how do you be curious with a part? Like, because a part wants to protect you. So how do you help people join up or even notice that there's a part?
Yeah. So the answer is both the same and different depending on if I'm doing work kind of in my own system by myself or if I'm doing work with a client. And that is kind of to hold as much self energy as I can kind of in my system, hold that space if I'm working with a client, and hold that space if I'm working in my own system. And I think for me, curiosity emerges when I clear everything else. So I don't know if it's so much cultivating curiosity as it is that is the natural kind of state of embodied self. And when I'm getting curious and I'm feeling compassionate, like that's a really good clue that I'm probably have access to that self energy and that I've done kind of the work that I need to do with my parts to help them kind of take a step back and allow that to kind of flow in. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, because I think you had maybe a different flavor in there as well that I didn't address.
Well, I think you're definitely touching on it, and to kind of take a little bunny trail, you touched on some of the C's of self. So can you just kind of go through those a little bit so that we can identify how we know that when we are in touch with self?
Yeah. So the key question when you're like a practitioner is you can ask, the person you're working with, how do you feel toward, whatever part you're working with? And you may not explicitly say it's a part. Like somebody might say, I'm so angry, like got, this going on. And I say, okay, how are you feeling toward that part of you that's really angry right now? And if you hear something like sad, then okay, I've got another part coming in. If you're hearing something along the lines of, it's the 8 C's of self, I'll probably be able to list 6 off the top of my head and forget 2. That's usually
we'll fill them all in.
I'm the same way.
But it's, compassion, courage, confidence, clarity, calm, connectedness, creativity. Ooh, I got 7.
You got
the last
7.
One. Yeah, the last one that I forget.
Yeah. I'll look it up.
I'm so curious though. It's like that one.
So
it's like
it's calm, curious, compassionate, connected, confident, creative, courage, and clarity. So I think it was confident. Yep.
Was it confident?
Or courageous.
Or courageous, I think is the one I missed.
Courageous.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's that one.
Okay.
And so when you hear an answer that like is really sounding more like that, and it's also about a person's affect, or again, if I'm working in my own system, my own affect, because the tricky thing can be is we can have self-like parts, and sometimes those self-like parts can hold one of those C's. So for example, one of my knowledge-seeking parts, my scientist, he's very curious. but he's curious with an agenda, and he's a detached curious. Like he doesn't, he'll hold kind of emotional distance. One of my caretaking parts, unbelievably bottomlessly compassionate. But again, like compassionate with an agenda, compassionate with maybe like some codependency or some I need to save you. Or so for me, like the best way to tell if I'm in self is, do I have an agenda?
That's
Am I
good.
trying to get somewhere?
And I like
so
that.
Good, Katie.
How we would, a word that we would use is like, how are you trying to achieve that or pursue that with sympathetic energy or like with urgency? Or and so I love what you're saying there. Is there an agenda? Because if there's an agenda, there is urgency. There's a task that needs to be finished rather than a curiosity. And so you can be curious, but it's a curiosity to fix something, to solve something,
Right.
not just a curious, compassionate curiosity of just being and knowing.
Right.
Oh, I like how you explained that. That was really good. I have a couple questions, Han, but I want to give you a chance to jump in and ask what's going on with you.
I'd love to go the direction, and this might cover some of your thoughts, Luke, of how to incorporate somatics into IFS parts work. I think that's kind of the direction of this conversation with Katie that I think people will really benefit from. So let's go there now.
I think that's a great idea. And that wasn't where I was going, but it is what our podcast is about. So I'm glad you jumped. That's it.
Yeah.
It's my ADHD brain. It's like one track mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. We love it.
So in IFS work, a lot of times we start with a trailhead, just meaning something to be explored. And there are a lot of different ways to find a trailhead. And when you are doing kind of more somatic based IFS, a lot of times you'll start with the body. What's going on in the body? What sensations are you feeling? Is there pain? Is there tension? Is there, fluttering? Is there a temperature differential? Like really trying to use more words that are about like, what is the sensation that's happening here? And getting people to really, and this, be careful about consent here, because depending on kind of what people have experienced, a lot of people intentionally and understandably disconnect from their bodies because there's, people have violence done to their bodies, and, there's potentially like chronic pain or, protectors that keep us safe by pushing and ignoring body sensations to stop, like my achiever, right? So really just like being careful about consent in everything that we do, but especially if you're getting into bodily sensations with somebody who's not used to being in their body. And with that, like very gently, like getting really curious about, okay, what is that sensation? Like describe it more to me, like tell me more about it, and really grounding somebody into that embodiment and that kind of being with. And that also, whenever you're kind of describing something, you're not distancing in a cold way, right? But distancing in like, this is not encompassing all of me, right? You're getting a little bit of like observation ability, or some of that ability to separate. Yes, exactly. It is unblending. And a lot of times, well, I would say actually every time I've ever done this with a client or myself, that body sensation, there's a part there. And it's there for a reason. And there's a message in the sensation.
Yeah. So there's a couple questions that come up from that. How do you know when to push forward and when like this part is not ready to be explored? So how do you do that gently with consent, and what does that look like in your work?
First and foremost, checking in with myself to make sure that I'm holding myself energy. Because if I am holding on to that in my own system, it's that open-hearted, compassionate curiosity that'll really, it is not impossible, of course, but much harder to be steered wrong. Because when you're really able to be attuned and connected and really present with somebody, you're going to see what's happening with their energy. You're going to see, what's happening in their face and in their movement. And there is also explicit consent of asking sometimes. Like I will sometimes say, is it okay to keep talking to this part? Let me know if there are any other parts that are coming up that are, cautioning us. Like, your system knows best what you need. I never know more about what a client needs in their system. So just always honoring that, respecting that, and really just leading with, I'm kind of walking with you and maybe guiding you. Here's a place to look, like here's maybe something to be curious about, and holding on to that self energy and that presence to help you learn what that feels like and learn to feel it for yourself. But I never know more than your system about what's right for you.
Yeah. I love, again, like that's where that compassion, curiosity, connected, like you're staying attuned with them, and you don't have that agenda of like, okay, we need to fix this part, or
Right.
get this
Yep.
part back in line or unburden it. So let's push in.
Yep.
It's more of
Yep.
walking with and letting them be the guide. And if you have self guide, like walking with them, then there's not an agenda of what it looks like to engage with this part, and they can allow you in as far as they're safe and as far as they're comfortable with. I love that. So what does it look like as, so when there is sensations, there is pain,
Yeah.
and this is maybe a hard question to answer. How do you engage with that? Because obviously that sensation's there for a reason. So how do you help them explore it without like being afraid of it or like
Yeah.
shutting down? But how do you help them with your curious self, kind of bring distance and be curious and hear that message that it wants to share with them?
Yeah. Always gently first and foremost.
Absolutely.
And compassion to me a lot of times means really acknowledging that something sucks. Right? Like if somebody is saying, I have had this pain in my back as long as I can remember, and it hurts so bad right now and it's so flared up, like really just holding that and not looking away from it myself, right? And just saying like, that sounds really hard. I think there are so many times where we know that the state of your nervous system, right, affects the pain that you're feeling and what happens with pain, especially in chronic pain situations. So if you're activated around your pain, it's likely your pain is going to feel worse, right? So you've got your pain and then you've got your feelings about your pain. And a lot of times feelings about pain, in my opinion, really just need to be seen and held and empathized with, and not told like you're too much or this is too scary or this is too much for me to handle. And just, having that like presence of, I see you and I'm not looking away, and you're right, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like getting that affirmation, it was really powerful for me, right, to get that. I've had chronic back pain, I've had chronic migraines. That was another part of why I got so interested in somatic IFS. And when I'm working in my own system and I have a drug-resistant migraine and I'm sitting there with the pain and just kind of looking at it and being like, this sucks. And I'll talk to myself like a small child, like, you're in pain right now and I'm sorry. Like that's really hard. So helping, oh, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Sorry, Katie. We work a lot with folks that have chronic conditions and chronic pain. And I just love that you're basically saying empathy is the antidote to the fear and the activation that pain brings into our systems. I love that. We resonate with that. And that is just, I think it's so reflective of what it is to be human and the deeper needs of being human. Like, yes, being out of pain is a need, but even deeper than that, not being alone in our pain, even if it's ourself.
Yeah.
There's so much self-abandonment
Mhm.
in the chronic pain, chronic illness community, because it is so brutal to have to stay in a body with pain. So self-abandonment in the moment is just such a coping skill, and not skill necessarily. There's
Adaptation.
places, there's definitely times for that, but yeah, adaptation. So to say like, this actually deserves and needs your tender compassion and empathy, and those that can sit with you in that pain. Yeah, I think it is absolutely foundational, and I'm so glad that you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
that's spot on. I mean, the way that you said that, absolutely. And I think there are so many folks with developmental trauma. We know there are links, right, to chronic pain conditions between that.
Totally.
And a lot of developmental trauma is not having access to safe enough caregivers that help you learn that affect regulation and that ability to know that my pain is not too much, right? And to help you learn to hold it and help you learn that there is safety still even within it. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
it's this overwhelm of like, if it's too much for your caregivers when you're a child, well then how could you ever be expected to not think it was
Yeah.
too much, right? So there's this
Yeah.
gentle reparenting of kind of learning to be your own safe enough caregiver and learning to hold that with your younger self and help them understand that, they're not too much, they never were too much, and there is safety even within it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of clients, I mean, that's probably one of the biggest like mind bending questions of like, wait, what? You're saying to find safety in either emotional or physical pain? Like, I can't tell you the number of times folks have just been like, that's insane. Like, what are you talking about? And again, making space for that. We can appreciate the what's the word? The ludicrousy of such a thing. And then we can take a step back and consider foundational human needs. And if safety is one of them, and yet we're never going to have a life, we're never going to have no sensations, no pain, no suffering, no emotions that feel really crappy, no hard conversations that feel really activating. We're never going to live a life without those things. How then can we be in this human body and experience the various things that we're going to experience without living in a state of survival, without living in just our parts? And there's a way, and it is hard, and it does feel kind of counterintuitive, but to be able to give yourself safety when the whole world says, oh, well, no, that's not safe. Like, that's a crappy situation. It's hopeless. Just kind of feel everything you feel and be taken away by it. Like, basically that's going to rule over, versus you can hold space and hold presence for those things and still be okay. So yes, we hear what you're saying of, yes, you can still anchor into that sense of safety. And that's ultimately a goal of healing, to be able to feel any sensation, any emotion, hold any hard truth, any nuance, like to be able to hold space for those things that feel very uncomfortable or activating, and still stay connected to self. That's our work.
Yeah.
And self can handle it, and we all have access to that. It doesn't mean it's easy, but we do have that access. So we hadn't talked about doing this, and if this isn't the right direction, no problem. But I'm curious if you could share, you said that somatic sensations always, you've seen, tend to have a message behind them. So I'm curious if you could give an example, either from a client or from yourself, of what that migraine might be communicating, or what that back pain, or if you
This is
think you'd be
why
open
this
to
is
that.
why we're so good at this, babe. Because that was my next question.
Was it? Yay.
It was.
Oh, I love that. Attunement.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about that. So I have a part that holds an enormous amount of tension in my jaw. And that is a big driver of my migraines. That part, my current understanding, because I'm always learning more about my parts, but my current understanding of that part is that that part really felt that it needed to arrange my face in a particular way in order to communicate compassion, or communicate like caregiving, or a literal mask, right? Like I have to hold my face in this shape so that I can be pleasing and accommodating and stay safe, because one of the big things that's in my background is heavily parentified child. So how do I manage the affect of my caregivers? And part of that, it's literally with my face. And it really, the reason I think my migraines turned chronic rather than just, random, was actually, I think, during COVID, other than just like everyone's stuff escalated, right?
Sure.
We were on Zoom all the time. And I think there was a part of me that was always paying attention to what my face looked like, and holding even more attention in, do I have the right facial expression right now? Like a very extreme fawning response. Like, do I have the correct expression for this situation? And just all of it just being held right here in like the masseters, right in my jaw.
Yeah.
Katie, I cannot, I'm literally freaking out right now. I'm like, how do you affirm right now what she just shared? Because it's so personal and it's so meaningful, and I'm so thankful. And also communicate, like you literally just unlocked something that I've been like on the precipice of understanding. For me, you said, oh my gosh, freak out moment of the week. This is exactly my experience, which is crazy because we're two different people. Like clearly we have very different lives, but that is my thank you. This is something that I've been trying to figure out, why I love to sit with people. And even before I was a mind body practitioner, I was a nurse for 10 years. And then I did nutritional therapy, which is one-on-one with people. I've been with people one-on-one for so long, and I love the hell out of it. And Luke's nodding because he knows that this has been an experience for me. It is so hard to attune my face to the person I'm with. It's not hard. It just takes so much effort. And when I'm done, I literally feel it in my jaw muscles. And I have had a TMJ diagnosis. It's a lot better now. I would say it's like 80 to 90% better, but I'll still feel that message, like you're explaining, come back up in. And I'm like, man, it'd almost be easier to just be on like a virtual call versus the Zoom, because the amount of work that I do, you just described it exactly, Katie. So I'm not trying to like take your story and say, oh no, that's mine. I just resonate so deeply with what you said, that extreme fawning response of over attuning. And that was also my role, was attune, pay attention to the emotional energy of everyone and bring it all to a nice, relative, regulated, safe space. And that's what I did. And it's affected my literal musculature and headaches. And I'm so thankful that you did the work to hear from your parts to understand that better, so that you could just give that one example and put the massive light bulb on in my mind. And also everyone who's listening, connecting different parts of their story with different symptoms. It's just such a gift to do our work. So thank you.
I am so happy that that struck you. I mean,
Struck is the word.
yeah, I love how unique and common this work is.
Right.
I think it's always so important, right? Holding that curiosity and not making assumptions about why things are what they are in someone's system, while also honoring how much commonality we have and how connected we are.
Yeah, we do. We're more alike than different. Child development researcher would say, Karen Purvis, we're more alike than different, and we're made up of the same things and we need the same things. And yeah, like holding the nuance too. And also, wow, we're so similar, and there's beauty in that. And we can know we're not alone because of that truth of our humanity.
Yeah, yeah. And especially something like migraines. Migraines are frequently, right, complicated because they can be multi-trigger. So they can be triggered by muscle tension, they can be triggered by allergies or, environmental things, they can be hormonally triggered, right? So doing that connection work to try to really explore, like, when does this start? How does it start? Is also really helpful for figuring out what you need. Like, part of what I've done is IFS work, but part of what I do, I get Botox for migraines because, I get Botox shots in my masseters because that musculature is still relearning how to not follow that pattern. And I'm a big fan of kind of doing more than one thing simultaneously to help relief in the short term and the long term.
Yep.
Right.
And we
Like,
love that approach, Katie. Like, there's just so much wisdom, and we help people try to discern through that as well, because the reality is we're neurobiologically wired towards certain things because of our development, our attachment, our environments, the number of ACE score we have, our genetics, our certain predispositions. I mean, there's so many things that go into why these things have kind of ingrained. And so there's powerful ways to uningrain them and to like change our neurobiology. But like you said, like we're multifaceted, and that can be, it usually is. Most people, even if they're picking one approach, they're still saying, oh, well, I want to get to bed on time too. And oh, I want to make sure I'm drinking water. Like, no one just approaches health from one binary road. That's not even realistic. So we totally support that and applaud that, because you deserve to feel well. And so whatever ways, science or ancient wisdom, or, whatever path that gets you there is wonderful.
I've actually had a conversation twice this week of people like, I had a headache and I took medicine. Was that okay? I'm like, absolutely, it was okay. Like, we're not asking you to be in pain all the time and to suffer. Like, yes, we want to be curious about it. We don't want to just like ignore it or be disembodied, but you can still be curious and not suffer through the pain. Like, you need to sleep, you need to rest. And when you don't have pain, you're going to be more in that regulated nervous system state, and you can be curious, you can be more in touch with self. And so I love that permission of like, being curious doesn't look like suffering or just pushing through it. Being curious looks like asking the questions, and that may also be addressing the pain or the symptoms. That doesn't mean you're not being curious. It doesn't mean you're disconnecting or being disembodied or taking the easy road out. It just means you're human, and pain's not fun. And so we need relief. And sometimes being able to get in that safe and social to recover, renew, heal, we have to get out of that pain so that we can, like you're saying, sleep,
do those things that support the body.
Exercise, go on a walk, get outside. But if you have a migraine, you can't do any of that. And that's not your fault, but if you can help it, then you can address it from many different angles.
So then, Katie, would you call that a somatic protector, the jaw pain, for instance?
Yeah, it's a protector that is using my body to do something, and it might be using it to do something and there's like a side effect that has to do with sensation or with pain. There also are protectors that might use our body to get us to slow down. Before I kind of did some of that exploration, I actually suspected that the migraines were being generated by a protector that was in opposition to my achiever, because there are system polarities, which are where parts are on the opposite kind of side of a teeterboard on how do I keep you safe, and they get in these really like entrenched battles of, well, I'm gonna just achieve harder, well then I'm gonna add more pain so that you stop. So there are also somatic protectors that work kind of that way to get you to slow down, or flag you in that way with the body.
Wow.
Super common.
It's common and good to know, to be reminded of. And so we're not just pushing on that one protector, but realizing like that sometimes there's more than one. And so I think
there's garlic clusters of parts.
Yes. Along that line, so what if a somatic protector, you're asking for that message, what are you trying to say? And there's kind of nothing there, whether it's you're not familiar with this process or you are, but it's just blank. Like, what would you tell, or how would you help somebody in that situation?
It might not be the right time to find that answer. So really holding again that curiosity without an agenda. If you are doing what you can to communicate with a part and the part does not seem to want to communicate, it's not ready. And don't push it, because your system knows best.
Right. And that's again being aware of that self part being activated of, is there an agenda? And if it's you need to answer me, or I need to have an answer, then that's another part trying to maybe fix it or something. It's not self.
Yeah. And there's some nuance there. And again, like being really present in that moment with another human to do your best to see what that nuance is, because there are sometimes parts who have really, they're not verbal. So they might communicate in images, or they might communicate in feelings, or they might have different ways that they are communicating that aren't as straightforward. And it's not that they don't want to communicate, is that there's a communication barrier. So really like going back to discernment and just going slow and being careful and gentle.
Yeah, that's another great reminder that we have to be aware of to not have an expectation of how they're going to answer and what the answer is going to look like, but being more curious of how do they want to communicate, or do they want to communicate right now?
Right. Parts show up in all sorts of different ways. It depends a lot. Like I'm a very auditory person, and I don't really see pictures in my head. So my parts are voices and usually felt senses, not images, because that's how I work. Not assuming that parts are even going to show up as human, not assuming that parts have a gender, that they're a certain age, right? It's all down to what's actually here right now. Like, what can I learn from what's here? Not what am I projecting onto what I think is here.
Right. Such great reminders and guidance.
I think I would love to add before we wrap up, pain science is so complex and is so, it's a newer study in the world of studying neurobiology and how it affects us. So I think sometimes it's possible, just for the folks that are listening to this and maybe wondering, they've been doing a lot of work and there's still these resistant symptoms, and they really feel very angsty towards wanting to know, like, if I can just know the message, then I can respond to what they need and this can resolve. And we've seen amazing things happen in that regard. And also, learned pain can be from old adaptations and old responses that we have needed that we now no longer need, and maybe even have been unburdened, but the pathways have been traveled so frequently and so consistently that that's still a neural pathway in the brain that's still that learned pain, that conditioned pain is still present. And so just a reminder to give compassion to yourself if you still have whether it's pain or other mysterious symptoms, chronic symptoms. Kind of leave yourself open to the possibility that it could be a burdened part that still has more to tell you. And like Katie said, when it's ready, when your internal system can handle that, it will come forth as you stay curious. And it could be a biological pathway that has been so conditioned and so learned, and it's just going to take time, or like we talked about earlier, a multifaceted approach to help loosen the strength of that pathway. And so again, it's a nuance party. It could be both. And we just want to invite you all to hold softness there, because having suffering and wanting to figure out what your suffering is caused by and what you can do can really create so much more additional, like you said, thoughts about your pain can create so much additional struggle and despair and anxiety and depression and heartache and shame and all of these other things. So if you can embrace the openness to what message may come in its time, and also the fact that it might just be a conditioned thing that needs a multifaceted approach, that might help.
Yes.
Always staying curious.
Yeah, that's our work right there. So any thoughts, last minute thoughts of if IFS is not something, we kind of just mentioned that, but in addition to that, if IFS is not a good fit for someone, isn't working, or someone can't find IFS practitioner, are there other options that you would suggest to do this work?
Yeah, so specifically around, embodiment and getting more into attuned to your body, I think there are a lot of ways in, and depending on, where somebody's at and what's been in their history, you may need to start differently, right? Like I'm in a traumatic stress studies certification program right now, and they talk a lot about coming back to your body through yoga, through martial arts, through team sports, these other things that kind of allow you to maybe like dip in and dip out, or be present with the body doing something that you're enjoying, that's not scary, that might even be empowering. So I think that there's a lot of exploring what works for you to kind of spend time with your body, and like titrating that safety. Like, ooh, is it safe to sit for a second and notice what's happening? Does that feel safe enough right now, or does it not? And again, if it doesn't feel safe, not pushing it, because that might be an achiever part, or like a driving part, or a fixer part that's coming up that's saying, I need to fix this and I need to like check this off the list and do this right. I'm gonna do yoga right. I'm gonna do meditating right. Like, right? Like, it's not the point.
Right. It's not the point.
And dissociation is a powerful protection of our nervous system that is essential to survival. So sometimes there is a time to dissociate.
Absolutely.
It's not avoiding it at all costs at all times. It's I think getting to that awareness and getting closer to intentionality and to choice.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned these things that you can do that maybe you used to enjoy or are curious to try, these hobbies, these activities, the movement type stuff. One of the things we do when we're helping recover, one of the pillars the concepts is leaning into life and how life has the medicine that we need to heal us. And it can be terrifying to do so, to sign up for that, rugby class, or not class. What the heck would that be?
Season?
Season.
Yeah, league.
Wow. I was way
Sports
off.
people here, right?
Totally not.
Yeah.
Or pick up swimming, or start hiking, or if you can't do like more high impact stuff like that, even just going on a drive, at sunset time, or doing things that get your body to move and to start to become more embodied in a safe, incremental way. And like you said, could even be empowering and feel awesome. And that's a great way to start bringing more safety to that internal system that has deemed sensation a lot of time as dangerous, any sensation.
Yeah. And it could be even simpler and even shorter and less commitment. Like, I really like wrapping myself in a fluffy blanket sometimes, right? Like, that's sensation, that's engaging with your body. And it doesn't require, a whole bunch of movement or commitment. It's how can I connect with my senses, with my body in a way that feels safe enough and helps me get just a little bit closer to that presence, to that grounding.
In this moment.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, on that, you are in evening time, so you can go wrap yourself in a warm, fuzzy blanket and get some rest. Such a joy to talk with you, Katie. And we're just so thankful for the work you're doing and the work you've done in yourself that, like always, can flow out into the lives of others. It's such a gift to the world.
Yeah.
So thanks for being on the show.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for hosting me. It was such a pleasure to talk with both of you.
Thank you.
And with that, Build a Flourish audience, thank you for being here. We hope this episode is meaningful to you. Go ahead and share it with other people that are interested in IFS, and go ahead and check out Katie. We will share her links to social in the description notes. So go ahead and follow her work and what she's doing in the world. So until next time.